Okay, Stacey, I have a recommendation for you.
Okay, I'm writing it
Now,
down.
I know that we don't do this thing where, oh my God, you have to see blah, blah, blah.
No, because we've told people we don't like it when people do that to us.
But
And if you're doing this to me, I'm going to be really mad.
I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not. I have a recommendation.
Okay.
There's a show on Netflix. It's a 6-part show called Wild Wild Country.
I have heard of that.
And it takes place in the 80s. And it's about this...
The 1980s?
Yes. This ashram from India decides to relocate to the United States. And they buy this ranch in the middle of Oregon on top of the Rocky Mountains that's as big as the island of Manhattan. And they start building a city in the middle of nowhere, Oregon. Well, the nearest town is Antelope, Oregon, population 40. They're not happy about these people who practice a unique religion from India. Many people are calling this a cult. And they start stockpiling their weapons and, being vaguely threatening. So what does this cult do? You typically think, oh, hippies, peace-loving. No. They buy a bunch of weapons. And so it begins to be this like face-off. They've got this army, that's kind of, and then
So it's the cowboys and Indians of 100 years ago.
a little bit, but then they like bus in homeless people from all over the country because they want to take advantage of this legal loophole that says that if you've been a resident for 20 days, you can vote. And so they want to take over the county. And on the day of the elections, they sprinkle salmonella into all the Oregonians' salad bars to like make sure that people are too busy being on the toilet. They can't go vote. Now, here's the fun thing about this is that oftentimes you'll hear you or I are both want to say on this podcast, well, this is not a documentary. Here's the thing about Wild Wild Country. It's a documentary.
It is not.
This shit happened.
Not exactly like this.
Exactly as I told you, and it gets even weirder than that. This is one of those. The reaction from the show has been, how did we not know that this happened in our country? Well, but they show you Donahue, Oprah, all these people are actually talking about this. It was part of the conversation. Johnny Carson actually joked about the Bhagwan, who is the leader of this. It was part of the national conversation at the time, but it's this story that's just been forgotten. And the amount of found footage they've been able to dig up is great. And they are talking to all of these folks today who were involved back then, a lot of the leaders of this group, as well as some of the townspeople who were around. And nobody ends up looking good. The townspeople are just closed-minded, horrible, conservative people who, if you're not Christian, get the hell out of my town. But, these folks who come in from India don't end up looking all that great either. And there's this very charismatic lieutenant to this leader of this group called Ma Anand Sheila. And she is horrible, a sociopath, evil, I think is a word I can use to describe her, and yet so charismatic and so badass and gives such zero fucks. You kind of have to like her. It's wild. It is a...
So it lives up to its name.
It lives up to its name. Highly recommended. Go check out Wild Wild Country and tell us what you think.
Recommendation. That's what it's called.
I'm not forcing you to watch anything, Stacey.
Attention. Pop surgeons Eric and Stacy, please report to operating room 1. Pop surgeons Eric and Stacy, please report to operating room 1. Surgery is about to begin.
You're listening to Pop-Oration. I'm Stacy.
I'm Eric, and we're old.
Wow.
One of the ways that I know that we're really old is because you hear these things like, hey, guess what turns 20 this year? Guess what turns 30? Guess what turns 25? And you're like, holy shit. That was 25 years ago. So this is one of those things we're talking about, but it gives us a lot to talk about because we're one of those shows that takes a look back at those things that are like, wow, did you remember this?
So what are we talking about today?
We're talking about today a little movie called What's Eating Gilbert Grape? And I mean a little movie. It's a little movie. It's got a lot of big names in it.
Very much. It's very much a little movie. It has big names, but it also has a lot of names you've never heard of.
Yeah.
Literally. And
a lot of people who were not big at the time. John C. Reilly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that was fun to see him.
So
we'll get to the cast.
So What's Eating Gilbert Grape is a story about a young man named, wait for it, Gilbert Grape, who works at a shitty little job and has this ungrateful family and makes all the money for the family. He has a mentally challenged younger brother. He has a morbidly obese mother, and then he has two sisters, one of whom is in high school and one of whom is between jobs right now. And he's pulling in all the money, basically, tagging groceries in this failing little grocery store because there's a huge food land out on the highway.
Yep, there's a big corporate grocery store coming down on the highway, opening up rather, or it's already open. They've got lobster. Yep. Find out early on. And it's really running this poor little mom and pop grocery store out of business.
And you get the idea, what I loved about this movie, one of the things I loved about this movie is it really gives you this sense of place. This little town just seems like this, island in purgatory where nothing ever changes.
And it looks, the camera is panning to where I think he drops his sister as a teenage sister, and he drops her off at the dairy barn or whatever, dairy, whatever.
Where they sell ice cream
shop is. And we're going around, it looked like a ghost town. And I'm thinking, how does anyone survive here? Because there's no one to buy what you're selling if you have a store.
I mean, there is a high school. And you see the high school band at one point when the new fast food place opens. And there are people who live there, but it's just framed as such a dead-end town because Gilbert Grape just doesn't have any plans for his future other than tomorrow he's going to go back to the grocery store and try to make enough money to put food on the table for this family of his who lives in this house that his father built in the middle of nowhere. And so, so what is this movie about? The one kind of thing that happens in this movie is that a young woman and her grandmother get stranded outside this little town. Their RV breaks down. They need a part. It's going to take a while for the part to be delivered to this nowhere town. And so she and Gilbert get to know each other. And over the course of, a week?
Something like
or
that.
so, they fall in love. And, the whole, the tension, if there is any, is just all about what happens when this part comes back and they can drive away. What's going to happen. And that's the story. It's not plot heavy. It's a terrific movie. It's a character study.
It is a slice of life kind of movie. And it is an actor's dream. If you want to show people how good you are, you take this kind of movie because that's all it is.
Yeah.
You have extreme close-ups and it's all about these moments. There are no explosions as far as it's not an action film.
No, there are no big action sequences. As I said to you before, all the big moments of this movie are an extreme close-up, which is what actors love. It's all about their acting.
Correct. So it is a very quiet movie. So if you're looking for car chases and intricate plot twists, doesn't happen here.
No.
Johnny Depp, though, is not what people talk about when they talk about this movie.
No, Johnny Depp is Gilbert Grape. Juliette Lewis is this girl that kind of goes through town. Mary Steenburgen is this cradle-robbing, married woman on the other side of town. But everyone's attention went, I think rightly so, to Leonardo DiCaprio, who plays Arnie, Gilbert's mentally challenged younger brother, and really did a brilliant job.
I think he did a very, very good job. Do I think that he would do a different job now? Yes, because I think that in the intervening 25 years, we've learned a lot about autism and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
Because I believe he is on the spectrum there.
Do you think? I don't know if that was ever. Yeah,
it felt that way to me. But again, they weren't doing that at the time. That wasn't a thing. He was just, mentally ill.
We never talked about the spectrum at that moment. He's mentally challenged.
They're also in this small podunk town. Who's gonna know spectrum?
Yeah, no one's going to talk about whether. Yeah, no. Exactly. So, but I think there was some, in addition to perhaps autism, there was also diminished IQ. Which is not necessarily attached to autism.
No. It was not completely that. I think he had a lot.
He had a lot of challenges. Yeah.
But then again, as I said, so it's Johnny Depp as Gilbert Grape taking care of this family. Two sisters and a brother and a mother who's morbidly, as you said, obese, doesn't go out of the house.
Yeah. Basically a shut-in.
Yes.
And shut in, from life as well as, she doesn't leave the house, but life doesn't come to her either. I mean, her entire existence is about this living room and about this family.
They move the kitchen table into the living room. every evening for dinner.
Yeah.
So that she doesn't have to move.
And she sleeps on the couch.
Correct.
I mean, she doesn't even, she doesn't travel from that particular space. And if this movie has a point, I kind of think the point is that Gilbert just, as a character spends every waking minute of every day taking care of everyone else, and no one really takes care of him. And so this girl that kind of breezes through town that finally wants to shower a little bit of love and affection on Gilbert is kind of a new thing for him, because he just, his entire existence is about taking care of everyone else. I think mostly personified through this very dependent younger brother, but then also his mom, but then his sisters, because like you say, he is the breadwinner of this entire family.
I don't know if it had a point. I mean, I get what you're saying. I feel like that's part of it. I think that the whole, let's put a little bit of a magnifying glass on the fact that it's hard to be a caregiver. And if you're the only one and there's more than just one person that needs care, it really, really sucks.
Yeah.
I feel like that, but I don't know if there was a point. I really did feel, and it's Lasse Hallström. Lasse Hallström.
Who also directed The Cider House Rules, who also directed Chocolat. That's another
Correct.
Johnny Depp.
And he does these quiet movies that are really just about a point in time.
Although he also directed A Dog's Purpose, which I never saw, but the preview made me mad.
Oh, there was no way. We have already talked about how I don't go to movies that are trying to manipulate me into crying, and the preview was doing that.
Well, this dog, dogs dying is a manipulative tack anyway.
Correct.
This is a dog who gets reincarnated over several. So you have to see the dog die over and over and over.
Okay. Thank you, Lasse Hallström. That's what he got. That's what he moved to. I guess that's his most recent
yes,
thing.
Well, it's the most recent thing that you've heard of.
Back in the day, he was doing, with people. But Johnny Depp, I thought, did a very nice. He was very real. It's here's what I'm going to say. It's one of the most real performances you'll see him do.
It's not very showy. It's a million miles away from Captain Jack Sparrow.
Thank you, and everybody else he's done. Willy Wonka, any of those are so Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where he's gone to right now. And it's not to say he's not good at it, but this shows you he can do just a real person. And even though he's the title character, most of the focus, in my opinion, is on Leonardo, who's the one who got all of the award stuff. But I thought Johnny Depp did a wonderful job of just being real, and it's hard to do that.
Yeah, he's terrific in this, and this was adapted from a book, and actually the author of the book actually wrote the screenplay. His name is Peter Hedges, and this was his very first novel. And I went on Amazon because I was curious, and I read an excerpt of the novel, and it's all in first person from Gilbert's perspective. So when you're reading the novel, it's all in Gilbert's head, basically. So the entire thing is from his point of view. Oftentimes when you take books like that and turn them into movies, that the central character is just so passive. Because when you're just narrating everything around you, the narrator is just not nearly as interesting as everyone else.
Because you're observing everything, and you're having to make these points about it.
Yeah, so in that way, I think even though there's lots of showier performances throughout this whole thing, Leonardo DiCaprio being the showiest of them all, I think he does a great job with probably, in some ways, the more difficult role.
I think it was the most difficult role
in the whole movie.
I agree.
So then let's get to Leo. Let's talk about Leonardo DiCaprio, since this was the first. This was the moment, I think, when the whole world just kind of went, "Oh my God, Leonardo DiCaprio, serious actor." Because wasn't he on Growing Pains?
Yes, as the juvenile delinquent, which nobody believed, by the way.
That's funny. But he was on this sitcom, and then all of a sudden, boom, Oscar nomination for this little independent movie.
Well, back in the day, there were TV actors and there were movie actors.
Yes, you couldn't really go back and forth.
You didn't go back and forth because the goal was you'd be a TV actor until you could make it in the movies. If you never were able to make it in the movies, hashtag Tom Selleck, then you stayed in the TV acting kind of biz. Now it goes back and forth because we also have other media. We have Netflix and Amazon, all this streaming stuff that's opened up a whole new world. Yeah. So now everything's kind of blurred. Yeah. But back in the day, it wasn't. So this was a huge leap for Leo to go from this, from Growing Pains to this big movie. But it's the same kind of thing that Johnny Depp did, going from 21 Jump Street into is it John Waters? I don't know which one was his first.
Crybaby? Was that the first one?
Was that the first one, or is it Scissorhands?
Scissorhands, that was Tim Burton.
Oh, my bad. So anyway, whatever. I mean, that was the thing. Is Johnny had already made that leap.
Yep.
Juliette Lewis also came from TV.
Yes.
And so that's what you were seeing was that and once you went to movies, you never ever went back at the time. Now they do.
Or if you did, it was considered like now you're on the B list.
Well, you're going your way down.
Yeah. Yeah, because movies were where it was at.
Correct.
So Leo had arrived with this movie.
And he got all these award noms everywhere. So everybody was paying attention to him. And I do think it was deserved because he did do a really nice job.
I do too. I mean, there's that whole disability trope. It's like, okay, so play somebody with, some kind of, physical or mental disability. And if you do it convincingly, here's an award for you, which normally I hate that whole idea. I think it's incredibly insulting to people with disabilities, first of all, and secondly, it's usually not. That's not the hardest thing an actor has to do.
I was about to say that's not the hardest thing to do as an actor.
Yeah, and harder thing to do as an actor is actually think through something and make a decision and change as a result. And a lot of times, these, you look at something like Rain Man. Dustin Hoffman's character doesn't really change a whole lot in that movie. That's Tom Cruise's role, is to start off as a selfish son of a bitch and then change into a more loving, caring person. Where I think this performance actually does deserve a lot of the credit, though, is that there are times when Arnie does think through something and he does change. Are we doing spoilers?
It's 25.
It's 25 years old. I mean, yes. Okay, you always laugh at me, but I'm like, 25 years old of a movie that I don't think probably enough people have seen. And there are a lot of people out there who might be listening who haven't heard this, but big spoiler coming, right, is that one of the major characters in this movie will die before the movie is over. And it is Arnie, Leo, who discovers the body first. And first, as he would, thinks that the person is sleeping. And so keeps on saying, wake up, wake up, wake up. And then you see it slowly dawn on him, I don't think this person is sleeping. I think this person might be dead. And then a separate realization, which happens for Arnie that might not happen for a lot of us, is, and they're going to be dead forever. Like, this is a bit, and
it's
that
a child.
scene,
that's a child's. That again, it goes to the challenge that he has is that his developmentally, that is a child. That's a 4 or 5 year old's point of you slowly get to these conclusions, kind of thing.
But he does make it there, and so you do see him change. And after that happens, he is a different character. He's gone through something that has fundamentally changed him in some way. But he hasn't
changed dramatically. I mean, he does change, but at the same time, I guess I felt like, to me, it was, I don't know, I didn't really feel like he necessarily changed. He went through something and it affected him, but everything kind of affected him when he had the moment with that locust or that cricket or whatever it was in the mailbox.
Sure.
He had this one moment of joy and then this awful moment of regret.
Yeah, but those were done in like these quick cut things. So he didn't play the journey from getting from one to the other the way he did with this.
So you're talking about his acting, right?
Yeah, I think that, so here's the way I think I would put it is that Leonardo not only played the disability, which he did play the disability. He spent a lot of times lots of
quirks
with mentally handicapped kids to get the mannerisms, to get the vocal tics, to get that, he held his arm in a certain way inspired by what he saw and the way that he kind of would repeat parts of his dialogue over and over again in a compulsive kind of way. He picked that up from a lot of his research. So he played the disability. I guess my point is he also played the character. Because another part of this movie, which is not really a spoiler because I think this is to be expected when it's a movie about a caregiver, at some point Johnny Depp falls down on the job as caregiver to everybody. And he really lets Arnie down. At one point, there's a particular moment in the story where he fails in his job to really give adequate care to Arnie, mostly because he's taking a little bit of time for himself, which you kind of think you deserve it.
Correct.
But at the same time, there are consequences to that. And Arnie has to spend, there's actually a kind of probably a good 20 or 30 minutes devoted to, is Arnie going to forgive Gilbert? Because at first he's really mad. he's really upset at Gilbert for the longest time, and you kind of slowly get this thing where he decides that he wants to be Gilbert's friend again, and he kind of comes back to him. These are kind of simple choices, but he plays the choices, and he plays the weighing of the options, and he plays all of that stuff so well.
Well, what Leo did is he showed what he was going to be doing in the future.
Sure.
Is what he did in this. He set the foundation for us to go, oh yeah, we've seen him do Gilbert Grape. Of course he can do that.
Yeah.
And so, several of his performances after this have been one of those where you're like, oh, that's right. He can do that because I've seen him before. Yeah. He did a really nice job. And for somebody that young, because he was still a young kid. Yes. It was, I think, even doubly impressive.
Yeah. Yeah. So a really, really, I think for all the fact that he got all the attention from this movie, yes, it's too bad that others didn't get also some attention for this. I think Johnny Depp probably deserved more attention for the depth of his performance, but I don't think that Leo's attention was undeserved.
Correct. I agree with you. I agree with that.
So Juliette Lewis is the other kind of main focus of this movie. If there's some major characters, I think she kind of rounds out the major characters. And she's the girl. She's Becky. Her name is Becky, which they wouldn't name her Becky today because Becky has a whole lot of other connotations. But she's Becky back in the 90s. And Becky comes through town with her grandmother. There's this parade of RVs that apparently happens. It's the most exciting thing in Arnie's life every summer when the RVs pass by. And one year, one of the RVs stops because it breaks down. So Becky and her grandma are traveling around, and they're stuck for about a week or two, maybe. They're waiting for a part. And, of course, they're in this nowhere, dead-end, small town. So they're waiting for this part. And in that intervening time, Becky strikes up a friendship with Gilbert, which eventually turns into something a little more.
Right. I've always liked Juliette Lewis's acting style. Even on that Married to the Maid. That was the TV show she was in.
Really? Never heard of it.
Well, it only lasted for one season. And what was funny, though, they're one of the few shows that the last episode, they actually closed it out. They knew they were canceled, and they did like this tying all the loose ends.
A nice finale.
And then at the very, very end of the show, they all turned to the camera and waved.
Okay.
So it was very funny to me. But I liked her in that. I didn't really watch it all the time.
Yeah.
I Married the Maid. That's what it was called. I didn't watch it all the time. But her character she was a teenage. She was like a 16-year-old teenager, and she had a lot of funny lines. And instead of being some of that typical sitcom, smart-assy kind of blossomy thing, her delivery was so dry and realistic. Mm-hmm. And I thought she was hysterical. I also thought she had just some of the best comic timing this side of Michael J. Fox, who I think has back in the day, he had the best. His comic timing was unparalleled. Anyway, she was very, very, very good.
And, of course, she had her Gilbert Grape moment in Cape Fear. So she was in the remake of Cape Fear.
She also did Natural Born Killers. I mean, she's
Cape Fear was the first one. Cape Fear was the first one. And she played a teenage, potential victim of Robert De Niro's Psychopath. Mm-hmm. And there was this scene where he, was kind of flirting with her. And she didn't know that he was a psychopath. She didn't know that he had designs to kill her father and potentially her to get back at Nick Nolte's character, who was her dad. And there was this moment where Robert De Niro put his thumb in her mouth, and she sucked on it for a little bit. And it was just like, ooh, but you got how dangerous this was because she was a hormonal and curious teenage girl. And there was this real sense of danger there that she kind of stepped into. And so she's always been, at least the career that I'm not familiar with Married to the Maid, but, there's always been this kind of danger line that she kind of walks. Because Natural Born Killers is very much that too. This kind of edge of your seat, what the hell is going to happen now? I'm a little scared.
I think, looking at her choices, I feel like she makes choices that are interesting. She doesn't do boring, which may be one reason why she was never the big Julia Roberts kind of screen icon, is that the choices she made as far as her career path and what she wanted to do were personal and something that she found interesting. This is an interesting character. Becky is an interesting character. And again, it's kind of like the Johnny Depp character in that it's interesting in its quietness. Mm-hmm. It's interesting in its realness. I found her real. She's quirky, but you know what? Every single human being is quirky. So I liked it because it was just this very real person, but I like her style. Her acting style is very personable to me. I enjoy watching her.
Yeah, I think the script just really wanted Becky to be kind of your very typical ray of sunshine on a cloudy day. Kind of person.
Right, but
and
that's
so
not
I think,
who she is.
But I think that's why Juliette Lewis is such a genius casting choice there, because I think someone who was just blonde and cute and pleasant could have done this movie, but it wouldn't have been nearly as interesting. And I don't know that I would have actually believed that Gilbert fell in love with somebody who was simply blonde and cute and interesting. Right, I think Juliette Lewis always brings a little bit more something. There's always something going on behind her eyes. She's always thinking about something in a new way. And she really was someone who, one of the interesting things is she treats Arnie like a person. And so Arnie comes into this as well, and how she treats him and how she deals with him.
She treats the mother that way as well.
Yeah, she also gets to meet Mom, and Mom doesn't want to meet her because Mom's a shut-in. And it's this lovely exchange where the mom looks up and says, I wasn't always like this, and Juliet just kind of goes, well, I wasn't always like this.
Correct.
And it's not that Becky didn't get what the mother was saying. It was just done, it was just a real act of kindness in that moment. She's a very kind person, but she plays it in a way that's not Pollyanna and annoying.
Right, and I think that, again, it's Juliet's interp on the lines, and then there's always this sparkle in the eye of, I get it, but what I'm saying may be something else, but I get it. And you feel there's an intelligence there. Again, I enjoy watching her. I thought she did a really good job. It's not a huge, again, this is not an action movie, but I think that she did a really nice job. It was a nice quiet.
Yeah. I don't think the script helped her out, though. I mean, at one point, it's like, the sky is just so big. I just love the sky because it's bigness. And I'm like, oh my God, if you weren't a naturally intelligent performer, trying to imbue that with intelligence would have been hard, but she did it.
Here's what, I feel like, and this is probably for later in the conversation, I don't know that this dated well. I'll be honest with you. I don't know that, which is one reason why I think that it's not one of those that you see on TV every once in a while when they're like, what did we fill this time? Well, let's put in Gilbert Grape. No, you don't. You don't. You're not going to get the sponsors. You're not going to get the people. I don't know that it aged extraordinarily well.
It is an easy movie to play that game with. It's like, how would the whole thing have changed if people had cell phones?
Correct.
There's a lot of places that this movie would have, changed the entire movie. Yes, it would have. I actually did enjoy it, though. I mean, I hadn't seen it for years when I picked it up again to watch it to kind of prep for this episode. And I really, really loved it. I remembered why I loved it so much. And I really, so it yes, it's of its time. It felt 25 years old, watching it. But at the same time, we love old movies, and so if you do want to take a little nostalgia trip back to the 90s, this is a great one to do it with, I think. Another performance I wanted to bring up was Mary Steenburgen, who's just, she's great in everything she does. I don't know that I've ever seen her do anything bad. You talk about
somebody who can do a performance that makes this person seem real. Mary Steenburgen does that in every single thing she does. Yeah. And even if it's a cliche-ridden kind of part. This isn't cliche-ridden. It is cliche, but it's not, completely. But at the same time, she brings some humanity to it. Yeah. And makes it real and makes her character sympathetic.
Yeah. She's the Mrs. Robinson.
She's
of
the
this
bored
little town.
housewife in this podunk town, and she calls the grocery store to get groceries delivered. Put all of that in quotes.
Yeah.
And the delivery boy,
scare quotes,
Gilbert, stays a little longer. I think it's funny when he comes. She just tells her kids it doesn't matter what they're doing. They could be in the middle of a project baking. She goes, get out now, go outside and play right now, get out. And I'm laughing. I'm like, man, somebody needs some.
Yeah. And like the kids don't know what's going on.
They have no idea.
Well, you sure. What the moment that I loved of her the most, halfway through, for reasons that I will not divulge because it's kind of fun.
Spoiler.
Mary Steenburgen's character was going to leave town, and so she stops by the grocery store to say goodbye to Gilbert and buy a pack of smokes while she's there. And she knows that Gilbert has a thing for this visiting girl because she's seen them around town.
Sure.
And Juliette Lewis is in the grocery store as well. And she's having this conversation with Gilbert. And then Juliette Lewis walks in. And you kind of see her and this look in her eye. And she's like, she could ruin this whole thing for Gilbert right now with just a phrase. And she doesn't. She kind of finishes up her pleasantries. She goes to the door. She kind of turns around. It's a very movie kind of thing. It's like, let me walk all the way to the door and then turn around and deliver my coup de grace, which is just in this case, she looks at Juliette Lewis and says, he's all yours. And I was like, holy shit, she just gave it away, but then she didn't. Like, it was this actually, again, it was this kind of kind thing where I think Juliette Lewis probably got that there was a little something going on there.
Well, I think for this Mary Steenburgen case, her character life had changed.
Yeah.
And so she was in a good place. I think had she been in a bad place, her character could have done the other thing. I don't know that her character was specifically kind all the time.
No.
You know what I mean? I mean, I feel like she handled that way. She was that generous because she was in a place, she felt like life was getting better.
And she was and she's getting the hell out of this town.
Yes.
Because this town is really just like, it's just
sucks
hell.
The life out.
It is just, this town is hell. The last performance I want to talk about is a woman named Darlene Cates, who plays Mama. And I usually just hate it when people define as a performance as brave. Oh, that was so brave. Jared Leto put on a dress and played a transgender. Oh, so brave. No, it wasn't.
No, it wasn't.
It was a job. I actually thought this was a pretty brave performance because this woman, as you said, she has quite a bit of, since this, she became an actor. She has quite a few credits. She's passed on now. But this was not her. If it wasn't her, it might have been her first movie, but it was not her last. But she really had to, say some things and really get to a place of like how society makes you feel so ashamed when your body is not what everyone wants to see. And that moment that we just talked about where she meets the potential girlfriend for the first time. And the very first thing she can think of to say is not, hi, how are you? No. It's, I wasn't always like this.
Right.
And,
because that's all she's thinking about.
Yeah. And just the way in which she plays that shame throughout. And I just wonder, had Darlene Cates as a person, she was living with this body for a while, one would assume, maybe had just worked all through that. And so this was just a way to kind of go back and give voice to a population of large people who just had never really been depicted as human beings much before. And if so, that's great. But it was something where you do have to go back to that moment in your life where you're just feeling this intense amount of shame. And she was opening herself up to a lot of ridicule from the movie-going public. And Gilbert says horrible things about her throughout this entire movie. I'm just reading the script. You'd have to look at this and say, do I really want to play this woman who's mocked all the time?
Yes, I think that I will go ahead with you and say, yes, I do think it was brave of her to do it because... it's not like Charlize Theron shaving her eyebrows, gaining weight to be ugly, and then you're going, well, that was brave. No, it wasn't, because that's not who she is. You know what I'm saying? She's playing on a part. This woman is going and playing a character who looks exactly like her and is being talked about because of stuff that is really her. I actually played a character that I was an overweight character, ironically, before I was. Now I could do it really well, but I didn't at the time. I was really too thin, and what's funny is during the rehearsals for it, I lost weight, so we had to make my clothes tighter so I'd look fat. But the deal was, I was so insulted when the director said, I want you to play this part. And I'm like, wait, what? That's how you see me?
Yeah.
And I had to really work through some things psychologically as a person to be able to be the actor to play that. And that's what, I don't know whether you say, did she get through it before or during the making of this movie? Can't say, don't know, won't ever know.
Yeah.
But it is definitely something that takes a lot of guts, and you've got to push through some things no matter what to get there. So yes, I think that her characterization was amazing just because of what she had to deal with. I would like to say one other character that really I loved, and it was Laura Harrington played Amy Grape, the sister, the older sister, the one who probably burned down the last place she worked for. They intimated that might have been the problem. But anyway, she was 36 years old playing a 20-year-old, first of all. That's hard.
Yeah.
I didn't know she was 36 until I looked it up.
I didn't either. I'm learning it at this moment.
I looked it up to see what else she had done. She didn't do much. She did like 3 or 4 other things. And then she stopped. I loved her portrayal in this. It was so quiet. It was even quieter than Juliet and Johnny's. You know, crap would happen, and you just and of course Lassa would have these close-ups, and it would be just these very small ticks, very small moments, very whatever, and you would get it. You would get where she was. You would get the decision. I just loved her performance, and it's a shame. I don't know what made her stop acting or whatever, but I really, really liked her. And yet I never heard of her before. Certainly I'd never heard of her since.
No, she's not. I had to look up the names of the sisters. So Mary-Kate Shellhart was the one who played the younger sister.
Yeah, she was good too.
She was good too. She was playing the obnoxious 16-year-old who just, a little entitled, and a little like poor pitiful me because I have to live with this horrible family, which you kind of understand. It was very real.
That's where 14, 15, 16-year-olds are.
But you're right. The older sister had a lot more going on in terms of her decisions that she was making really affected the entire family. And she was also a caregiver. She wasn't the breadwinner. And you don't find that she had as much to do with Arnie. Arnie left the house with Gilbert every morning, and Gilbert not only had to hold down this job, but also keep tabs on his brother, who really liked to climb up to the top of the water tower every possible chance he could get, which is a problem. Also in this movie, John C. Reilly and Crispin Glover played Gilbert's friends.
John C. Reilly, I'll be honest, he plays kind of the same, a different color of the same character a lot.
He plays doofus really well.
He really does. And, this is naive, I can't wait till the Burger Barn gets here kind of thing. And you're just, and life's going to be grand once I start working as,
But you know what I loved about this movie is that he wasn't wrong about that necessarily. I mean, so it started and he was like, the Burger Barn's going to show up and they're going to bring the whole thing on a truck and just plop it down and it's amazing. And he was just so impressed by the Burger Barn Corporation, and he was going to manage this Burger Barn. Well, halfway through the movie, the Burger Barn shows up in the middle of a funeral, which was hilarious because Leonardo DiCaprio goes crazy because there's a Burger Barn while they're trying to bury somebody, which is funny. But then the next thing you see is they're opening up the Burger Barn, and John C. Reilly is the manager of the Burger Barn. You know what? I think in this town, that's about as good as you can do.
Oh, I agree. And don't get me wrong, John C. Reilly is a wonderful actor.
Oh, so good.
It's just that this was like, oh, okay, I get it. I get who you are. Who was a surprise to me was Crispin Glover.
Crispin Glover, he
so
did some
fucking weird.
He is.
He's so weird. I don't ever need to meet him. Ever.
Yeah, John C. Reilly.
I don't want him to know my address. I don't ever need him to know I exist.
John C. Reilly, I could have a beer with. Crispin Glover, I'd be like waving on the other side of the room, going, "Love your work, bye." He's done some David Lynch movies.
I don't want him to be able to recognize me.
Wasn't he in Wild at Heart? Was that anyway? He like the one who ate a bug, and he ate a bug until like it was a real bug, and he just ate it.
And he was in Charlie's Angels. He was very good. Don't get me wrong. The guy can act. Although, is he acting? I don't know. He's a fucking freak. But you probably remember him. He's McFly. He's Michael J. Fox's dad. That's where he came to. That's where everybody knew him from. Was Michael J. Fox's dad in Back to the Future.
But in this one, he's weird adjacent. He's of this town. He's not so weird that he takes you out of the movie at all.
No, not at all.
He's the funeral director of this little town, and he just talks about dead bodies over brunch, as one would do, right? If you were the funeral director. And talking with these kind of curious doofuses like John C. Reilly and Gilbert Grape, who's just kind of sitting there,
Big man on campus. He has all this information. You have no idea.
And he wears a suit, which is odd for this little town because everyone else is kind of, managing burger barns and bagging groceries. So we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we'll talk a little bit more about what we got out of Gilbert Grape and give our final diagnoses. We'll be right back.
because, I mean, as you noticed, what we talked about the most are the characters and the performances in there, because that's what kind of movie this was. This was a movie about a slice of life. It was about these different characters and how they're dealing with this 1 or 2 week period, what happens there.
Yeah.
And, of course, if you're going to do a small movie, you have to make sure that the relationships between the characters are realistic, believable, and make sense.
Yeah.
And so that's what we were going to talk about a little bit, is some of the...
Yeah, so almost as much as a performance, the kind of the chemistry between actors becomes its own kind of a thing.
Well, it's where casting comes into play.
Yeah. So I think that the most, affecting relationship in this entire thing, despite the fact that it's probably a love story, is probably between Gilbert and Arnie.
Definitely.
The brothers.
Definitely.
So these two brothers, and Gilbert's the primary caregiver for this young boy who takes a lot of energy. It would be a full-time job, period, just to take care of him, because he's active and he doesn't want to. You don't want to make him a prisoner of anything. He's an active 17, 18-year-old boy, but he's just he flies off the handle at a moment's notice, and likes to climb up the water tower, and so it can be difficult.
And if you look at the timing of it, okay, let's say so Gilbert's turning 18. Let's make it round numbers. So that makes not Gilbert. Arnie is turning 18. Mm-hmm. So that makes Gilbert, let's say, 10 years older. So he was 10 years old when Arnie was born. And so let's say that, so the mom had Arnie and never lost the baby weight, and it got more and more and more. Yep. So from 10 years on, and do we know when the dad, do we know how long ago that was?
I have no idea. But I think it goes Gilbert, Amy, Arnie, and then the youngest
but I'm just
sister.
wondering how long Gilbert had been the person who had to take care.
Was at least since he was a teenager.
At least since he was 10 or 12 years old. So he's had this going on for, 15 years. Mm-hmm. And I think that looking at the patience in the first scenes, the patience he has, and clearly the affection he has for this younger brother who is so high maintenance. Yeah. There is some, he's clearly someone. Arnie is lucky that this was his brother.
Yes.
Because that's a long time. 17 years is a long time. Yeah. And you've not had a childhood because your mother had her issues. Yep. Your father died or went away or whatever happened to him. And you've had to be the guy.
And in fact, the opening scene of the whole movie is Gilbert and Arnie waiting for the RVs to come. And Arnie is so excited. This is like his favorite day of the entire year, or at least it's a tradition that he just loves.
Yeah.
And Gilbert is kind of making fun of Arnie in a way, but in a way that Arnie would never pick up on, because he would never be deliberately cruel to Arnie, but he can say some things kind of off to the side that Arnie's just not going to listen to. But it's so clear from the way that Arnie is behaving that he loves his brother. His brother is like his sun and his moon. And so, and then when they finally show up and he's just so excited, and Johnny Depp is just kind of plays this sly, very quiet smile. He's happy to see his brother happy. There is a deep kind of bond between these two, despite the fact that, Arnie is so mentally challenged. You'll never have a complete adult relationship with Arnie.
And I will say, I felt like Johnny Depp and Leonardo did have a decent chemistry. It would be interesting to see them in a movie now, to see whether they would still have that kind of chemistry.
I don't think they've ever worked together.
I don't think they have either.
Since then.
I don't think that they both, their career paths and the choices that they made, very different.
Yeah.
Very different. And so it's just one of those funny things as far as that relationship
Although
goes.
Leo will do the occasional Tarantino movie, which tends to go a little bit more towards the weird, which is kind of in Johnny Depp's wheelhouse
but
a little bit.
they're never going to audition for the same role.
Yeah. Well, they should play brothers again. That would actually be kind of fun to watch. So then there's all the relationships that Gilbert has at home in addition to Arnie. So there's Amy, and then there's Ellen, who is the younger sister, and Mama. And you just see them react to each other in very, very different ways. You feel like he's kind of got more of a partnership with Amy because the two of them have to make the adult decisions to keep this family running, and yet they're still like annoying older brother and annoying younger sister. That stuff is still there because, like you said, they never really had a chance to have a childhood, so they never really grew out.
They had to take over the mom and dad positions because there was nobody else doing that.
Yeah.
But they're really brother and sister, and they're really the children of the mom and dad. So it's a weird kind of thing, but they've had to figure out, and they're still figuring it out. Figure out what the relationship was. But they had figured out a lot, and they'd figured out how to deal with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then Becky comes into town. So that adds a whole new, twist to Gilbert's orbit. And finally he has someone who's paying attention to him. It's a really lovely scene where she just says, close your eyes. And it's very typical of this movie. They're not talking about anything to further any kind of plot along. They're just having these conversations. And she says, close your eyes and, what would you wish for right now? And he makes a wish for everyone in his life but him. Yeah. And she notices that. Mm-hmm. And she says, but what do you want? What do you want right now? And it just became really clear that he's never been asked that question before. No one has ever really been interested in what Gilbert wants. It's just his duties. What
can he do for me?
Yeah, his duties are so, present in his life that he doesn't take care of himself really at all. And so it was just and you saw him kind of struggle with this idea of what do I do with this person who wants to make me happy?
Right. Because
that's just never happened before.
Right. Yeah. No, I thought it was nice. I thought, again, it's quiet. It does. I mean, Lhasa has a style. And so there are things about it that reminded me of Chocolat even. Mm-hmm. And it's just these connections that these people have and these moments that they have, sometimes without any words. And I think he does that well. I think they had a nice chemistry. It wasn't blowing me off the screen. No. But I think that they were fine. I don't need to see them together on screen anymore. I mean, it's not like Tracy and Hepburn. They're fine. Yeah. I'm good in this movie. And these are still, I mean, we talk about how real they are in comparison to other work that they've done. This was also kind of seen in its day as a quirky little movie. Most definitely. Most definitely. That's
just the surname of most of the characters, Grape, is not a name you hear very often. And so and what's eating Gilbert Grape? I mean, there was a cutesy element to it, but also
I don't know if we answer that question.
No. I don't know that we ever do.
Yep. Sorry. Spoiler. That question never gets answered.
Yeah. So let's say there was a little bit of a dirty joke there because now we're going to talk about Mary Steenburgen.
Okay, maybe we do answer that question. But I'm bummed.
And she makes quite a meal out of Gilbert Grape at one point.
And Eric continues. On.
But, she had a pretty small role in this. But at the same time, there was the dynamic. You could tell the first time that he makes a delivery to her house with a bag of groceries that she really didn't need. You get the dynamic right away, and that she's so excited to see him, and he's just kind of like, "Hi, Mrs. Carver," and he was like, "Let's get this over with." But again, he's too nice to not be sexually exploited by this woman. He didn't want to be there.
No, but what else has he got to do? I mean, it's one of those. I think there's a boredom thing in there as well. What else you got going on? Where do you have to be that you can't do this?
True.
And he's a guy. Yeah. No offense, but he's a guy.
Well, men and women do kind of treat these things a little bit differently, but at the same time, it's interesting that in a post Me Too kind of viewing, I looked at this and I was like, wow. I mean, if the genders had been switched, and there'd been a young girl who was delivering groceries to a creepy older dude who was like, okay, get your clothes off. And she didn't want to be there. We would all be just repulsed.
No, this is totally because he's a guy.
By this.
The way we felt about this was only because it was the way it was.
And A, he doesn't want to be there. B, he doesn't really want to have sex with this woman. And when, they're almost discovered by her husband in this very first delivery, he is mortified and she thinks it's kind of sexy.
Yeah, it's just the risk makes it all the more hotter. Again, she is the bored housewife. Yeah. But again, Mary Steenburgen was able to take it to a different level as opposed to just, another bored housewife.
Yeah, and their relationship changes as the movie goes along, too. Even before she leaves town, he basically just kind of says, this is the last time, in a way that she believes.
Right.
And she's really hurt. by this. I mean, she really takes it as
because she's
a
very
rejection.
Unhappy. It's an awful town.
Yeah.
Okay, so final diagnosis.
Final diagnosis.
Why should anybody watch this?
I want folks to know before we kind of do our wrap up is that there is a perhaps a little tacked on, but there is a happy ending. This movie, despite the fact that this town is so dreadful, you are going to feel good at the end of this film. I did.
It's a happy. Movie, I totally think it's a hopeful ending. It's a very hopeful ending. No. I again, it's if you want action, adventure, and twisted plot points, this is not the one for you.
No.
But if you want some quiet, nice character studies, this is a really good one. If you're looking on how to act, this is a really good one because you've got some really good people to watch doing it. Yeah.
That's kind of my takeaway as well. I loved this movie when it first came out. For whatever reason, I watched it multiple times. I had it on DVD. Right? Remember those little disky things that you would put in? And I watched it a number of times. Hadn't watched it in 10 years. And while it doesn't feel timeless, I don't think that it aged poorly. I still really enjoyed it. It felt like an older movie, but I really, really just loved the time I spent with these characters.
And I think that's the way to go. I don't think it aged well as far as it very much is a movie in its time period. And if you take it as that, it is a lovely old movie.
Yeah. And
will it at some point be considered a classic? Possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly. Because of the acting and the performances in it. Yeah. So I do think it's worth seeing. Certainly if all you know from Leo is what you've seen in the last 5 or 6 years, this is a fun one to go back to.
Yes, because it is very different from, and it's interesting that he didn't get pigeonholed into let's just have him play another disability character. I mean, he's gotten to play a lot of really fascinating things. And I think you're right. It probably is because he was so young.
He was also very pretty.
He pulled this out, He's not pretty the whole way through this movie, though. There's an extended period where he doesn't want to take a bath. And the makeup artists did a really good job of making him in every scene progressively dirtier and dirtier and dirtier.
No, I mean, Leonardo is pretty.
Yes.
So he was pigeonholing him in this would have been difficult. Again, you're right. He was young, but he's also a good-looking guy. Yeah. So he was going to have some choices.
Yeah.
But no, I do think it's worth seeing. But again, it's a quiet movie.
Yeah. It doesn't make you cry. It did make me chuckle in several spots. So it does take you on a little bit of a journey. It's not a huge roller coaster, but it's just one of those you just kind of fall into. And it's a lovely little film. So if you haven't seen it, we haven't given away nearly as much as we could have. There's a lot of things that will surprise you. And the big decision that the family makes at the end was still kind of shocking to me, and I don't want to say what that is.
Yeah,
but this action that the family collectively,
at the very end, right before the hopefulness, there's this weird decision the family makes. I get why they made it. Yep. It was realistic for the time, but.
And they set it up really well. There were clues at the very beginning of the movie that we were headed in this direction that I didn't notice the first couple times I saw it.
So, again, there is a surprise.
Yes.
There. Don't get
We've left some things that we have that unspoiled in this. So, I think folks should see it. If they haven't seen it before, and if you're fans of any of the actors we've talked about, this is a great thing to go revisit.
Yep. It's Pop-Oration. I'm Stacy.
I'm Eric, and we'll see you next week.
Oh, you can catch us on Spotify now.
You've been listening to Pop-Oration with Eric and Stacy, the podcast that dissects popular culture one bloody organ at a time. Subscribe today on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, YouTube, and any other podcast listening site or app. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook at Pop-Oration Room. Check out our website at popoperationroom.com for all of the podcasts, our blog, swag, and games. Until next time, when we're back in the scrubs.